Welcome back to the show. Joining me today is Kristin Baer. She is the founder of Brave Boost Leadership in San Antonio, Texas. And through her work, she provides research-informed whole human leadership support through coaching, facilitation, and consulting to help leaders and their teams truly connect to themselves and those they lead so they can move from stuck or overwhelmed to authentically aligned thriving. Welcome to the show, Kristin.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited you joined us. And we talked a little bit before we hit record about sort of our personal transformation and evolution. And I would just love to know, tell us a little bit about your personal evolution and how that has informed the way in which you're currently showing up and serving your clients and the broader sense, the world.
Thanks for having me and giving a space to talk and share stories as well about our personal journeys. I think it is one of the most impactful things that we can share. And I feel like in this recent season, I've been seeing more and more that my journey is not linear at all, like I would like it to be. I really want that nice, neat, straight line where I move from one place to the next place of growth. But I find myself moving in spirals and circles and twists and turns and coming back to some of the same learning that I feel like I've been doing for a long time. And I feel like for me, my journey started really early. I remember being a tiny little girl at a dinner party with my parents, and everyone was downstairs playing cards, eating their little snacks and drinks as everyone was together and chatting about the weather. And I remember being up in my room and thinking, is this what people have to talk about? Is the weather? I don't understand. Is this what adults are concerned about? There's so much more to life than the weather. And so I feel like early on, I had this sense of not quite belonging and of longing for sort of deeper connection with people and not seeing that around me and not quite knowing how to find that. And so I ended up really taking to school, loved being a learner, was in 500 activities and trying to figure out what it is that I really love doing. You know, tried Girl Scouts and band and theater and music, and I think that exploration time was really important for me to connect to what I love and who I am. And as I went, I feel like I faced that pull that we often face of, do I give up part of myself to be part of the group, or do I go with the group, you know, and say maybe that's not my group and I stay true to myself. And so I feel like for me, authenticity was something that I always gravitated more towards, that being my grounding, of finding myself not quite fitting in groups and saying, that's okay, I'll find another group. If I don't belong here, I'll find somewhere I belong. And I did explore a lot of different communities, including a faith community. I got really involved in pursuing a faith community and identified there. It became a huge part of my identity. And I shared with you a little bit of my story then of kind of wrestling with, as I got more into my faith, realizing that actually I was more and more having to give up parts of myself to fit into that community. And so again, went through a lot of hard thinking about what does that look like for me, and moving through lots of different iterations of my faith and what that looked like, leaving communities, joining other communities, and have also been on a big wellness journey myself. I had a major injury to my back in 2015, ended up with some serious nerve pain, and it meant I was like the weird girl standing in the back of gatherings because I couldn't come and sit down with everyone else. And that was a moment of disconnect and not really fitting into communities and finding my way physically with what that was like when I couldn't participate in what everyone else was doing.
Yeah.
And so I feel like these are just some snapshot moments for me, but a lot of these moments have left me really digging into what does it look like to show up as myself
Mm,
in spaces, and how do I pursue connection and community. It's what has moved me to be really passionate in working with leaders to help them figure out who are they really, what is their passion, what is their purpose, what are the strengths that are their unique strengths they can bring to situations, and then what does it look like to then connect to the people that they're leading or the people they're working with in a real
mm,
way that allows this space for hard conversation, the space for transformation and community and growth.
mm. Oh my gosh, you said so many things that I want to come back to. So I'm taking notes so I make sure that we hit all of them because I hope we can. If I go all the way back to something you said really early on, you were talking about how our journeys don't usually fall in a linear pattern. And I've had other guests on who've described sort of the same thing where we feel like there's like this. So, as a teacher, I identify this as a concept that we use in education where with students, we will take them through this spiral of learning. So, we want to hit, for example, the French Revolution. We want to hit it in first grade, and then we want to come back and hit it again in fourth grade, and then we want to talk about it again in ninth grade. And as we go, we're going to get more detailed and more involved and add more to that concept. But the reason we do that is because you're not just going to get it on the first time around or the second or the third. It takes like many, many times to really fully understand that concept or that learning. So I feel like the same thing happens. And I have a whole like belief system that shapes the way that I talk about and look at this. And I'm going to use that lens that I have with the understanding that you and all the listeners may have a totally different lens, and that's beautiful. But the way that I see it is like, as a soul, I sort of have this prescribed set of learnings or this curriculum that I want to come here and experience. And it's really important for me. For example, I'll say one of the things that I've learned as a soul that I feel like I planned for this in this lifetime was to learn that I can't change people, that I'm capable of loving them, but I have to love them where they are, and that it is not my job to ask them to change or to try to change them. And that, oh my gosh, the number of times that has repeated through my life is like
Mhm.
staggering at this point. But I feel like that is an example of our journeys. Like I felt like I was a pinball in a pinball machine. I'm like, I don't understand how any of this connects. I feel so lost. I'm confused. And half the time I feel like a failure because our culture tells us, well, if you're ping ponging around and if you're going to try this and then quitting that and then going over here and then trying that and dropping this, and that you're a failure, that that's not okay. But I love that you said there is beauty and value in exploration. And that was like, oh my gosh, I love that concept. And I'd love for you maybe to talk a little bit more about how the concept of exploration and being open to that also helps us to start to see the patterns in this non-linear journey, to see where we're returning to areas of growth and learning.
Yes, I appreciate your input there from the background of teaching too. I come out of adult learning, and
Mm,
it is very much the same thing. You're planning in all these repetitive learning moments, and it's funny how life also serendipitously gives us that learning as well. And I appreciate you sharing too about that idea of exploration. It has been a big part of my life, and I think it's a big part of what allows us to stretch and grow and learn. And there are really two core foundational concepts that I feel like have helped me be able to continue to explore, because it can be so scary. As you said, we can feel critical of ourselves. We feel like we're not living up to whatever the should is that we are
mm,
supposed to do. We should go here next. We should succeed. We should provide something. We should learn something, which those shoulds never help us out very
yeah.
much. And so for me, the two core concepts I feel like, and things that I work a lot with the leaders that I work with on, are the first is courage,
Mm-hmm.
because I do feel like it takes so much bravery. It's why I called my business Brave Boost Leadership,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to hold space and to stay open to learning and to stay open to the ever changing environments we find ourselves in, to stay open to continuing to evolve, to stay open to even face what our real emotions and thoughts are that we're having. We can be
Yes.
our worst critics, and especially I work with very highly driven leaders usually, and those voices of, hey, I didn't get this or I didn't do that, can be really harsh, or I shouldn't be feeling this way. Even with the work I do and knowing how important it is to see feelings without judging, I still find myself thinking that. And so to be able to have the courage to check in with yourself to say, no, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking in this moment. This is where I am. This is who I am in the present.
Mm-hmm.
And to also check in with yourself on, what is it that I really want? Where
Mm.
do I really want to go? If I didn't have to listen to the fear coming in or the other voices in my life around me, what is it that I really would want to do and pursue?
Mm-hmm.
And it can take a lot of courage to lean into that and really answer that honestly and truthfully, especially if we're not where we want to be.
Mm.
And then the second concept I think that has really helped me stay open and explore is curiosity, and
Mm.
cultivating that curiosity mindset, because it is so hard, especially when you do talk with people who have a different belief than you, or have even a different interest than you.
Mm-hmm.
It could be, I was thinking this morning about a friend of mine in college who I met, and he loved country music. And
Mm.
immediately when I met him, I had all these associations, of someone who loves country music, which is not my thing.
Yep.
And
Me
so
neither.
I thought, okay, so it's that gut reaction, right? Of like, oh,
Yep.
well, you're not my kind of person, country's not my thing. And I would ride in the car with him and he would blast these country songs that he loved. And he started to share with me why he loved country music and the
Mm.
stories and the experience of sitting with people he loved on the back porch and having a drink and talking about the stories of life and sharing deep connected moments with his family. And I realized, oh, well, I love all of that too in
Mm.
life. Actually, we have a lot in common. He became one of my good friends,
Mm.
and I ended up loving some country songs because of that. But the initial reaction was
Yeah.
not one of curiosity, right? And that's what happens to us as humans. Our initial reaction when something is different, when it's scary, when it's unknown, is to react with shutting off or closing
Mm-hmm.
down or defending something that is maybe a deep held value of ours.
Yeah.
And the ability to cultivate that curiosity mindset and say, there's so much I don't know
Mm-hmm.
about this person, about what it is they think, about where they're coming from, about their experience. And if I can stay curious, to
Mm-hmm.
stay open to explore and learn more, then one, I will probably find similarities where we really do connect that I couldn't have even imagined, like sitting on the back porch having deep conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And two, I'll probably learn something that's going to help shape my perspective and give me perspective I couldn't have come up with if I just stayed in a safer bubble.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it really comes down to that courage and curiosity to stay open. And it takes both of those, I think, to be able to
Mm-hmm.
do that.
Yeah. So I'm a naturally curious person. So this is an easy concept for me to
Mm,
link arms with and welcome in. But my initial thought for someone who maybe isn't is there's going to be this really strong, like gut level reaction to some things where you will feel offended or hurt or angry or scared, where someone who's naturally curious will be able to take their lens or their current beliefs and say, I've got all these, but because I'm curious, I want to learn more. I want to know more. I want to do better. And I want to explore how expansive this gray area really could be. Because I firmly believe, and this is a belief that's taken me decades to shape, is that there is almost no black and white, and it's pretty much all gray area. That there are a lot of things that at first blush I would say, oh, that's just wrong, period, just wrong. And then you bring up these other nuances to the situation, and all of a sudden you've got me questioning everything I believe because, well, I thought it was just wrong, but then you bring up all of these areas of value that you have, and all of a sudden I'm not seeing so much the wrong in that. I'm seeing a new perspective that I never thought I would be able to come around to. And I think especially in, and we're always going to be saying this for eons, but especially in the time we're in right now, it's so critical for leaders, especially, to be able to see some gray area and be open to putting aside some things that they may feel really strongly about in order to understand others' perspectives and where that gray area may actually take them into some agreement in those places. And I don't know if it would help to get more specific on this topic. Like we said, country music, and that's like a really fluffy, approachable way of talking about this. But like, there's so many hot button issues that people get really, really staunch about. And it's just like, but what do we really know? Like, I feel very removed from the conflicts that are going on overseas right now. But what do I really know? Like, I feel like a lot of Americans who don't have a personal investment in them are taking these really strong stands. And it's like, but we're not there. And that's not our family and it's not our culture. And how do we really know? For each individual, not just for the two sides or the three or the four that may be involved, but for each individual, there is a unique perspective of that situation. And there are millions of those unique perspectives. And I think, like you said, between the courage and the curiosity, not just as leaders, but as humans, it's so valuable for us to be able to say, I am going to allow myself to be curious here, even if it's a little scary, even if it pushes me out of my comfort zone, because I could learn something. And in learning something, I could become a more compassionate human in response.
Yeah, totally. And I think, the beauty of curiosity, and I like how you're exemplifying this, is you shared earlier, this is my belief system. This is where I'm coming from. And I'm holding space for other people's belief systems. And you're having this podcast and these spaces to dialogue with people in so many perspectives. I think that's the beauty of curiosity, too. It doesn't mean you can't have your own belief or a strong sense of who you are and a strong sense of what you think about an issue.
Yeah.
It just means that you are open and you are holding space to learn and to, as you said, develop more compassion, develop more space for connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I had recently a really good example of a leader. He reached out to me on LinkedIn, actually, and he said, I'm working with someone who is transgender, and from my worldview, I do not support that lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And what he said to me is, however, I've seen your posts online about the importance of diversity and creating a space for people. And I do want to create a space where everyone feels like they can come to work and be safe,
Mm-hmm.
where everyone feels like they can come to work and be respected
Yeah.
and be seen and understood. And he said, I don't know how to do that, because I'm feeling this conflict of my own sense of how I see the world and what I think is right or wrong from my perspective, and how I want to try to support this person,
Mm.
and feeling safe and feeling seen and feeling supported, because I've seen them be mistreated, and I've seen people use the wrong pronouns intentionally, for example.
Yeah.
And he said that I don't support, and I'm
Mm.
feeling very conflicted in how to move forward. And for someone to be vulnerable
Yes.
enough to say, here's what I really believe, and I also want to stay curious and learn more myself, and create a space where everyone can feel valued and seen and respected and
Mhm.
supported. It takes so much courage, again.
Mhm.
And we were able to talk about how to stay curious in that. He was able to have a conversation with this
Mm.
employee, and they were able to talk through some of the hurts that had happened even between them,
Yeah.
and be able to find that common ground of, I want to learn more and I'm open to learning more, and above everything else, what I want is for you to feel safe and respected in this place. And to
Mhm.
me, that is, real courage and curiosity in leadership, to be able to say, yes, I might have this personal belief for the sake of humanity, for the sake of the community, for the sake of building a safe work environment, and beyond that, treating people really with dignity and
Mhm.
respect. I am going to commit to curiosity, even when it is maybe in direct conflict with a personal belief I've held for a long time,
Mhm.
and it's going to open me up to challenge some
Yeah.
of that and challenge the way I've been thinking. But I'm willing to go there because of this greater value for creating a space where people can show up and know that they can bring their full selves and find belonging and acceptance and support there.
Hmm. I think that is like the ultimate courageous question or statement is I don't know how. I don't know
Mhm.
how, because a leader never wants to make it look as though they don't know. That's really scary. But to be able to go to someone with whom you work, or even just a friend or family member, and say, listen, this is what I want to do. I don't know how to do that. Can you help me? Like, that is so courageous and so beautiful. And what a beautiful way to open up that relationship and saying, I want to do this for you. I'm not sure how. Can you help me figure out how I can do that? And it, I mean, it will remain to be seen how that plays out, because there's a lot in conversation and communication that has to do with listening and then responding with aligned action. But just the way in which that conversation started, like, makes my heart smile a little bit, because there are still people who are willing, even when that, again, that's a really scary situation where, this is a belief that you've held that you really feel strongly about. It is like, my spirituality is the core of who I am. So I understand how someone would feel like, wow, opening up to this challenges my core beliefs, because I may hear or see or learn things that might change them. And then who am I when my core beliefs start to shift? Where is the essence of my personality and my being when all of a sudden I'm not the same person? I have different beliefs than I did before. Um, I know I could speak about this, but have you ever experienced that? And what has that felt like for you?
Yeah, it's a scary place to be. I, went through, I think I alluded to a little bit in our opening, my own personal spiritual journey as
Mhm.
well. And about 5 years ago, had been a very strong Christian believer. That was a big part of my life. And even going through the journey, didn't share a lot with my community in that, because I didn't want to influence their beliefs or think I was questioning their beliefs. It was a very personal journey for me, and ended up in a community where, and I think I had shared this with you in our talks before the podcast too, that I was showing up week to week in a community where being married was really valued above being single, and
Yeah.
I was single. Being male was really valued above being female, and I'm female. And so showing up in this space and hearing this messaging week after week felt like it really started to take a toll on me, to
Mm.
be in a space where I was having messaging that in some ways I was less than
Yeah.
whatever the ideal standard was. Although I don't think the leaders in those spaces would have phrased it that way. That was
Sure.
how the message internalized. And so ended up moving away from that faith community, and in the end have been on a spiritual journey, moving away from a lot of the beliefs that I held for many, many years and had chosen. I wasn't raised
Right.
in that environment. So when I
Mm.
was a younger person, had chosen, had carefully, thoughtfully thought about what I really did think or believe. And moving out of that space, the way I talked about that journey at first was that I felt like it gave me freedom, but I lost a little bit of peace in that process
Mm.
initially, because that there's a lot of peace that comes from having a very well refined worldview, where you know exactly what you think and
Mm.
you know how to make decisions based on what you think. And so to blow that open a little bit and say, oh, I don't know if this is what I think anymore, and
Mhm.
I don't really know what I'm replacing it with yet, because I'm on this journey of thinking through new ideas. And so I'm not just moving from one thought to another thought. It's really this experience of thinking about, what is it that I now believe? It leaves you in a scary space, because those beliefs, those values, that's how we make decisions every day, right?
Mhm.
It's how we get up in the morning and say, where am I spending my money today? How am I going, am I shopping local at a small business because that's what I really value? Or am I going to support a larger brand because I love this brand and that's what I want my money to go to? So all of these decisions that we make day to day come from those core beliefs
Mhm.
and values. And so to break those open and
Mm.
question those and go on a journey to really redefine those, it is the most unsettling place to be. I think for me in my journey, that's how it felt. And yet, I think because of my commitment to authenticity, I was willing to go there, because I really have just seen that if I can dig into what is it I really think and be willing to stay on that exploratory journey,
Mhm.
that I know at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, when I wake up, when I go to bed, and I feel that sense of I'm being true to myself and I'm aligned with where I am right now,
Mhm.
that ultimately gives me more peace in life and more of that sense of, this is how I want to show up in the world. And because I've experienced, spaces where I didn't belong because of who I was or how I was showing up, it's made me really an advocate for other people to be able to show up as their authentic selves. And now working with leaders to help them be able to equally know who they are, understand what it is they think in any given season or moment, and stay open to new learning, new exploration, and help create spaces for other people to show up as themselves too, which
Mhm.
is at the end of the day, that heart of inclusion. When people talk about inclusion, that's really what it is both being able to show up as who you are and feel like you will be able to belong when you are there.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I had a question regarding, how do you even begin to make decisions when you're in sort of that liminal, like in between space of, I'm unsure of who I really even am at this moment. But I think I want to back up one step before that and just go back to the beginning of finding your passion and pursuing that is first returning yourself to wholeness, is figuring out, well, what are all of these parts of me? What do they look like and where do they fit? And it's like, I imagine it as like almost putting your body back together. Like, imagine you were functioning without arms and without legs and without ears. And all of a sudden, now you have arms and legs and ears that are a part of your body. And then you have to figure out, how do I walk? How do I use these to manipulate things in my environment? Oh my gosh, I have a new sense that I didn't have before. What do I do with this? And that's almost like what it felt for me, at least personally, when I started to recognize all the parts of myself that I had sort of taken off or set aside or put away or hidden. It was like, oh, how, like a little bit awkward. Like, how do I show up in this space as this whole person? Where before I was showing up in this space as 25% of this person. And now I'm all of this person. And that's a lot. Like, how do I even, how do I even start to do that? But I guess the question I'd love to tackle first is, what does it look like to even start finding those parts of ourselves that we're denying or that we are detached from?
Yeah, I think it's again always a journey. And so I think that's the starting point, is knowing that, it's probably not going to be one moment where you have to do a quick transformation or figure everything
Mhm.
out. And wherever you are in your journey is where you are, and
Yeah.
that's a great place to be. And so I think step one is just embracing wherever you are and not worrying about, where it is you want to be. So just
Mhm.
understanding where you are first,
Yeah.
and having lots of compassion for yourself in where you are. So to use your example of, that moment of realization that can be uncomfortable, and for you of, oh, I was 25% of who I really am in this space. Or for me in my spiritual community, realizing, oh, I've been disconnecting a little bit from myself to fit
Mm.
and contort into this space that isn't elevating actually who I am.
Mm.
I think when you come to that realization, it can be overwhelming. And so being able to just sit in that space and say, okay, but this is a new step and this is where I am. So that's a starting point. And I think that's true whatever you're trying to grow, whether it's this deep transformation you and I are talking about, or it's just integrating a new wellness practice or
Mhm.
integrating a new family practice that you want for your family. Is step one is just acceptance and
Yeah.
acknowledging where you are is the right place to be right now. And then I think for me, I think about my experience and how community was such a big part of being able to make some of these transformations and connect to who I am authentically. And for some people, that might just be one other person. It doesn't mean you need
Yes.
a huge space. There might be one safe person. For
Mhm.
me, when I was going through this big faith shift, it was in the middle of the pandemic. So we couldn't go
Mhm.
out and meet with people or connect face to face. And so I started a book club with two other
Mm.
friends, and we met virtually once a week in our book club. And I was really searching for, yeah, who am I now in this season? And how do I figure out who I am? And so we started reading Simon Sinek's Start With Why, where he
Mm.
talks to business leaders about what's your why. And we did the follow-up book, Find Your Why, where we spend hours digging into what is my why, what drives me to show up. And the power of that experience for me was going through this practice in Finding Your Why. And what he presents is you share some stories with
Mm,
the people that you're doing this with. And a big part of what you do is listen to each other's stories. And you listen to some stories about high moments and low moments, not necessarily huge moments in life. For me, one of my big stories was just getting into a volunteer experience where it was the
mm,
first time I stepped into leadership and how exciting that was for me. And so as you're listening for these themes that come
mm.
up over and over again in these stories. And I remember the moment of going into sharing these stories with each other. We all said, but what if we share our stories and there are no themes? What if we share our stories and there's no threads and we don't find any commonalities? I don't know who I am. We have an existential crisis. And we just went into it anyway and shared our stories. And as we went, it was very cool to see at this point where you did start to see themes and you start to see, actually, from the time you're a little kid to now, there have been some things in your life that
Mm,
have stayed the same, that are core to who you are, even though you've changed and grown.
yeah.
And for me, connection, authenticity, having meaningful exchanges, community. Those were in all the stories I was telling. But I didn't realize that. It was only through
Mm,
sharing my stories with these two other safe people who
mhm.
said, Kristin, you're talking a lot about these things. These seem to be core values for you, and these seem to be core to who you are. And so being able to walk through that experience with these safe people, to listen to my stories, to know who I am, to help me reflect, not tell me who I am, but reflect back to me what they're hearing so that I could really lean in and dig in. It's part of why I love doing the work I do now with leaders, to
Mhm.
get to listen to their stories, to get to know them, to get to reflect back to them. Here are the strengths I hear that you have. Here's what I hear you really care about. Because even if we're highly reflective, which I am, I'm a person who lives in my
Mm.
head a lot. You cannot possibly see all of the things about yourself that other people can help identify for you and pull out for you and reflect back to you. So for me, that experience, it's why I'm a coach. It's why I have a coach, because that's
Mhm.
what a coach can help me do. It's why I share stories with friends and ask them to reflect back. Those exchanges are so important, I think, when we find ourselves in that space of needing to reground
Yeah.
into what do I really value? Who am I? Because even if I've been in a space where I wasn't showing up fully as
Mhm.
myself was still there. And so
Yeah.
now I just need to give it some space and some breathing room to uncover what are those different pieces. And I think story and listening to story is a powerful piece of that.
Mhm. Yeah. And that also touches back on the idea that as you begin this process and you start to gain awareness around these areas that you may not be fully listening to or fully integrating within yourself, you'll start to feel like there are some spaces where you're giving up those parts of yourself to belong to that community. So it's not, like you said, it's not an overnight process. It's not, oh, all of a sudden I know all the parts of me that I need to embrace and I'm good with that. You can still sit in those spaces that feel a bit uncomfortable, consciously create communities that are safe for yourself, because it gives you a stepping stone of I'm not going to do this work alone and then all of a sudden leave this and have nothing to replace it with. Like, it's okay to take time and space and not have to do everything overnight. I know I certainly didn't. I took years and years and years and years to fully embrace who I am and figure out, okay, now that I know who I am, what does that look like to embrace that? Like, there are a lot of shifts. There were a lot of shifts that I had to make in my life to fully embrace that. And it took over a decade. And that's okay. It's you on your own process in your own time, consciously creating community that feels safe, inviting them to be a part of your story, asking for that reflection. And when it's your time, you'll know it's your time to take the step. And another thing I wanted to bring up is I notice that when we get close to feeling like, okay, like there's enough momentum here that I'm ready to take a big step, a lot of the time, something I saw in myself and I'll see in clients is that we start asking questions that we already know the answer to. We're just looking for this validation. So I'll say something like, I'm really thinking that this is a decision that I'm going to make, but I just want to get some more perspectives around that before I make this big leap. And we already know that that's our decision. And we already have one foot in that decision that's already made. But I think when we start asking that question, that can really be a signal for us that like validation is really important to people. But the greatest validation that you can have is when everything in you is aligning with that decision that you're about to make. There are going to be people, no matter what decision you're making, it could be the greatest decision for you of your life. And there are going to be people who are going to say, what are you doing? You're throwing your whole life away for that. And I mean, no matter what, like you could say, I'm going on a mission trip to serve in this country, and I'm leaving my home because I feel called to do this. And it's a beautiful thing. And like, who would not support that? And there will be people who are naysayers about it. So you'll always have those people who are not going to validate you. But if you feel that, I say feel because I'm such a feeler. I feel when I'm misaligned with something, I feel disconnected. I feel uncomfortable, actually physically in my body. But then when I think of the decision that I'm about to make, even as scary as it may look, I start to feel peace and I start to feel comfort and I start to feel calm. And I don't know if you can speak to what that may look like for someone who's not necessarily a feeler, because I'm such a feeler, that's the language I use. But I'm sure you've experienced that in like when someone's about to make that big decision, big step, what is the language they use around that to know that, yes, that's the time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'm a big feeler too, so
Oh, good.
I totally get that. Yes, I tend to lead with my heart and heart on my sleeve.
Yeah.
But I've worked with lots of different leaders, and I love what you're bringing up, which is that space of uncomfortableness that happens when we're trying to make a decision. And often big decisions take some of that process. I'm someone who actually, you would think, loves digging into this deep process and sitting with the space. And no, I'm human. I hate it like everyone else. I hate the uncomfortableness that comes from not feeling 100% sure. I just want to know. I just want to have the answer. And I think it's part of why I have gotten into this space, because I want to be able to figure out how to sit with that discomfort and tension and find tools to navigate it, because otherwise it can feel so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so, in fact, I just did some of this work this weekend. I have launched my business last month in October. And as an entrepreneur, you face so many decisions every day. There's always new paths you can take, new ideas to explore, new partnerships you could make, potential clients you're talking to, and it's a million decisions. And I was feeling some tension as I'm trying to make a decision in a next step about a course that I'm wanting to put together. And I was talking to someone else about a course they've already put together and they're ready to license to me to run with. And I was thinking, do I want to use their course? It's already ready, it's there. But no, actually, I want to build my own course and put that out. And it's that tension of the decision where you're weighing all the factors out. And
Yeah.
so I sat myself down with a huge sheet of blank paper and
Mm.
I said, okay, the first thing we need to do is get all of the options on the paper.
Mm-hmm.
Because often when things are in your mind,
Yeah.
it feels so overwhelming because you're spinning in
Yes.
all of the possibilities. And so I sat down and I just wrote out what is every available option to me, down to some of the very details that, normally feelers would not be writing down: dates, times, who's going to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, this is the classic pros cons list that they
Yeah.
make. I did not do a pro con list, but what I did is I got down every option on the paper because there were about 10 different options. Even though I had in my
Mm.
mind boiled it down to two,
Yeah.
I said, let's explore every option there is and not be scared of it. So I think separating out your decision point
Mm-hmm.
from exploring the options can be really important, because when we try to conflate them and make a decision before we've really looked at all the options, it's too much. So I think separating those out, saying, right now, I'm just looking at all the options. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no pressure for a decision. Once I have that out, then the second thing that I spent some time doing is chasing down this question: what do I really want? It's the
Mm-hmm.
number one question I use as a coach, because what we want is always shifting. And of course, we have our core values that ground us. We have, that North Star that we're directing to, maybe a 2-year plan, 5-year plan for the big planners. But knowing what is it I want in this season and being able to come back to that and check in with that. And I said, what I want is to be able to create. It's why I left my job. I want to create what I have to offer to people in a way that's, from my perspective, for
Yeah.
leadership skills, in getting coaching skills, getting team building skills. And once I was able to sit down, put out all the options, check in with what I really want, which is to create, then the decision became clear of, yeah, it's really only a need for pressing faster or a fear of what if I create isn't good enough that
Mm-hmm.
would move me towards choosing to go with somebody else's product right now. But what I really want, and the option that I'm choosing, is to move forward with what I create, because that's what I want for myself in this season. So I
Mm-hmm.
think, being able to get all the options out without the pressure of the decision, being able to check in with yourself of what it is that you really want. And often we have to ask ourselves that, 5 or 6 times to really write it all out and get to the heart of it. That work is really important, I think, then for those big decisions that are life impacting kinds of decisions, or even smaller ones like this, which was a business decision, but is going to
Yeah.
set my course for something.
Yeah. I love that. And I know I'm going to add on to that. In a lot of my decisions, also, it comes down to two pretty great options. Or one terrible option and one really good option, depending on, if it's two people involved, I have my option, they have their option, and we're
Yeah.
really feeling strongly about our choices and solid about those. But when you're in a relationship, you have to come to some sort of decision that's going to benefit. It's going to be mutually beneficial, especially in the business world, in a leadership setting. So what I love to explore when I'm putting things out like this is, okay, I've got option A, you've got option B. And if we were both to hold those really loosely, what could our third way look like? And I'm always looking for third ways in situations. How can we take what I really, really need that I cannot sacrifice, but strip that away from the decision? So these are my needs and wants. Take your things that you really need and you don't want to sacrifice and strip that away from your decision. And then what would it look like if we put those together and found that third way that could benefit both of us, even if it means sacrificing everything that my decision looks like? And that has been such a nonviolent and peaceful way of approaching making decisions that I've embraced. I think that's what led to, like, I'll use my really personal example of my coming out and separating from my husband and what that looked like. And for us, he didn't want to separate, and I felt like I had to. And those are, like, it seems really black and white there. Like, how could those two things possibly go together? Because they can't. Well, the third way that we explored and ended up coming together as a team on was, well, we're not willing to sacrifice our children's mental health. So first, we're going to come together and say, what would it look like for the best possible outcome for them? Staying in their home, being in their activities, staying in their school district. How can we make this as smooth as possible for them? Because that's something that we can agree on as a team, even though this team is kind of separating. And then what else could that third way look like? Like, here are my needs that I have to have. I have to honor who I am as a person. And I want you to feel supported and safe and loved. And we can't do that together. But how could we do that separately? And so it looked like consciously uncoupling and being really, really compassionate and being great listeners. And yes, going to couples counseling and giving our counselor a really hard time, because this was the first time she worked with a couple that was making a decision that didn't agree, and yet she was working with us in a compassionate space to help us do that. She said, I would normally step back and refuse to work with you if you're on two different pages, but she helped us find a space where we could just have honest dialogue. And that was what we needed, was just a safe space for honest dialogue. And so when people are approaching these really, really big business decisions, life decisions, they're ready, like, they've identified, they've got awareness around their right path for them. They've built in that community support piece. When they're ready to move forward, I would just suggest, obviously, find a guide, find a coach to work with. That's a really safe space. What we do is hold that space for you and mirror to you, and we're compassionate supporters, and we don't make the decisions for you. We just want to see what's best for you and support you in that space, and ask some really good questions, which we love to do, of course. So find a coach, but think about, there could be options here that you're not exploring because you've gotten so myopic. There are so many more options in life than what we boil ourselves down to. And so I guess that would be my suggestion when we're talking about people getting ready to make these decisions and take big steps, is it's okay to take some extra space and time to step back and look more broadly, and maybe even separate how strongly we feel about this decision so that we can look at it more objectively. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, but I love where we've gotten to with this.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your story. I think that's a really powerful example of being able to separate out what you're going to do, which is where we often find ourselves digging in on what we're actually going to do versus why do we want to do that? What is it that we value? What's the bigger purpose that we're trying to accomplish? And I think it's incredible that you all were able to do that in such a personal, high stakes situation where this is, your family, your individual selves at stake there, to be able to step back and look at what is it we value, because there are things that we both value that we can be on the same page about. And why do we want this? Well, you want to be true to yourself. Your partner supported you in that as well. And so being able to separate out the action that you're doing from what you value, what's the purpose, what's the why that's driving that what, I think is such a powerful tool and a key in a lot of personal and leadership situations where you're at odds and it seems like there is no way forward. it's not just about, oh, find a compromise where you both give something up. No, it's about look at what the higher purpose is and what is behind this, that thing you're wanting to do,
Yeah.
so that you can find some kind of mutuality
Mm-hmm.
in that higher purpose. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. I've committed myself at this point to being the person who is going to do hard things, make mistakes and get messy, but also share the outcome of that, because I really want to be a bridge builder for people. Like I don't want other people to have to go through the messes and the anxiety and the worry and the hurt that I went through. If I can use my story to build that bridge for people so they can get over that chasm more easily, then I want to do that. Like I'm really committed to that. And yeah, I just think that this is a process that can be applied in all spaces where we're making decisions and they're high stakes decisions. I may go into a decision with leadership or with the team and feel like I'm going to come out of it on that end with that result. But here's something that someone deeply values that may completely change my perspective. And I'll say, you know what? I don't have to have that result, but I can get behind this value. That's important to me too. And if the result looks different because I got behind that value, I can sleep at night knowing that that value was more important than that outcome. And that, I mean, really, at the end of the day, that's what I want. I want to be able to put my head on the pillow and go, the actions I took today, the way that I behaved, the words that I spoke were aligned with who I truly was.
Yes, you're speaking my language. That is totally what I want to support leaders
Yeah.
in doing as well, is finding that authentic alignment and feeling that sense of release, that sense of, okay, I can thrive in this space because who I am, what I value, those unique strengths, my purpose in the legacy I want to leave, I'm able to live that out in a way that feels true to who I am, and in a way that creates space for other people to do the exact same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, I love this. Thank you for having this conversation with me.
Same. Thank you
See
for
what
creating the space.
See what happens when we hold space and we have no agenda for the conversation. I love it. It's beautiful. Okay, I am going to make sure that we put links in the show notes for everyone to get in touch with you and connect with you, because I am hoping that they will just resonate with what you've said and what we brought up, and want to work with you and see what else you have to offer. So thank you so much for being here with me today and sharing this conversation.
Thank you so much for creating this space and asking the questions and sharing your story. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.